Okay, part two of our knife primer, and I want to preface it with where we left off on the last video with the Spanish blade, okay? This is an unadorned stabbing weapon. There's no modification here, okay? You see the difference? This weapon is designed to be used a certain way, okay? It has a certain fluidity with which it can be wielded, but most notably, when you're stabbing with this weapon, it's designed in such a way where the point will come in and where this is, so that it counterbalances and it doesn't fold back on your hand, okay? What about other solutions to that problem in a knife culture where stabbing is a primary means of using the weapon? Now, in Spanish knife fighting, I'm not saying that stabbing is the primary means. There's actually, the Iberian systems have a lot of complexity, but we can see modifications made on this knife so that weight distribution acts a certain way, okay? But what are other solutions to that problem? This is a South African knife. Again, a very cheap knife, okay? And you might know that in South African knife systems, okay, they're stabbing centric, okay? And if you're a stabbing centric knife culture and you don't have a lot of money, there's a lot of poverty, what's the most important aspect of a blade that you're going to use to stab somebody? Well, if it's one length with handle, then you want to make sure that it's as much of a full tang weapon as you can, so there's no weakness at the joint. But if you're going to have to conceal that weapon as a folder, you're going to want it to stay in place, and you don't really have a lot of means for a very expensive locking system. This is a type of locking system used on this knife, okay? It's basically a ring with a bunch of rivets, and the ring falls into the rivet when the knife extends, the gear, if you will, and locks the knife in place, okay? It's not a particularly complicated way to embellish the knife. It does not allow for quick deployment. However, if you're going to stab with this weapon, it does give you a lock so that your blade has some augmentation at the joint, okay? I also want you to notice that, lo and behold, what do we see on the end of this knife? The same angle with the handle, okay? That same concept of, with a stabbing knife, having some sort of point of leverage to allow you to hold the knife when blood is dripping and things like that, okay? So, totally different knife culture, okay? I forget the name of the South African, but it's all stabbing. This has been confirmed by people who research those systems over there. There's a famous guy, you can look him up on YouTube, and certain similarities in how those blades are designed, coming from a totally different culture, okay? What about this? What is this for? Why have all this stuff? What does that do? Okay. Okay. When you're fighting and you want to inflict trauma on an enemy, a lot of the wounds killing is done through trauma induced initially. So people don't all necessarily die right on the battlefield, okay? How do you create those conditions? Well, one particular way is to create as much cutting surface and trauma to the body as you can per any sort of a pass on this weapon, okay? A weapon like this, it's basically designed so that you're compartmentalizing the weapon and giving much more area by putting curves on the weapon. Imagine, if you extended this weapon and took all those curves out. You've now made it more succinct, and all these things will catch and rip as extra area on a blade would, okay? So you're taking a blade that has just a smooth surface to cut. you're cutting, what you cut with that is much less than when you can jut into the body with these points and cause massive trauma, okay? Through extending your blade and then compressing it, okay? You can see you have a point here of entry. This is not necessarily a fighting knife. However, it mimics what a kris does. And a kris uses that principle, okay? If you look at a kris, it's designed so that it can penetrate in, and most of your damage is the ripping movement. A lot of Indian weapons follow this principle in different design, coming eventually to the point of the one and only Karambit, one of the nastiest pieces of human technology for killing ever created by any culture, okay? You have a lot of nasty knives that do a lot of nasty things, but a lot of people would say that this has got to be the worst. This mimics a claw. It's designed exclusively to rip like a claw does. It's used in close, okay? This is not designed to stab in and just stab. It's designed to rip, and same principle as the kris. You're looking at not only your entry, but your exit, okay? With a kris, once you get that blade in there and you pull it out, you have all the rest of this compressed blade that is going to cut across and cause trauma, right? It's the same principle here. You cut them, once you're inside your target and pulling out, okay, you can do that very fast and very efficiently. And in addition, you can puncture vital areas with this top point, okay? Stabbing weapons, on the most basic form, are so dangerous because you just have to puncture a certain area and you can cause immediate deadly implications, okay? Weapons like this, you're coming in and you're causing mass hemorrhaging of the body tissues. And it's mostly caused pulling the weapon through and out, except if you're just puncturing areas, okay? So you see a lot of attacks with this designed along those lines. You have your throat, you have your arteries cutting, okay, etc. And then when you get in, you're simply putting the weapon in and pulling out to tear apart your target areas on the exit point of using the weapon. Let's go next to, well, we're doing Southeast Asia. The kukri. Okay? People say the kukri is an ambush weapon. Wow, you don't say. Marilyn Monroe was a pretty girl. You see where I'm going here, folks? To say that this is an ambush weapon is to say water is wet, okay? How and why does this function as an ambush weapon, okay? Let's talk about that. Shock and awe. Just coming in, taking somebody by surprise, lopping things off. You can do that with a hammer. What makes this different? Okay? All right, we're going to stop here and we'll go into the next one. Okay? Stay tuned for part 3.